I didn't grow up with Troma Entertainment or any of Lloyd Kaufman's films. I grew up on Tremors and Eight-Legged Freaks, but Troma walked so these movies could run. I would walk into Hollywood Video or Blockbuster week after week and rent the same damn movies. Tremors is absolutely perfect as a monster horror comedy. It has the right amount of cheese, humor, violence, and is a well-crafted masterpiece. To other people, Troma films are these kind of nostalgic memories. Low-budget B-movies which appeal to those looking for shocking and surreal films. The Toxic Avenger and Tromeo and Juliet are films that come to mind from Troma, which are perhaps the most popular of their catalog. It wasn't hard to go to a movie store and find a movie you've never heard of before, some pulpy or low-budget VHS tape that only exists on the shelves of some mom-and-pop shop. Troma has hundreds of films like this, from sci-fi movies to Yeti love stories. Now, don't get Troma confused with these soulless mockbusters you see deep in the bowels of Amazon Prime or Tubi. I'm not talking about Transmorphers, Alien vs. Hunter, The Terminators, or even Snakes on a Train.
What the hell is even that?
Troma films may seem like cash grabs, but what they really remind me of are films that I would make with my friends in the backyard. I mean that in the most loving way possible. Passionate people making fun films, throwing caution to the wind. They aren't meant for awards, they're meant for fun. Art isn't about appealing to critics. Within Troma's lengthy catalog are exploitation films, which I've talked about before. One that really jumped out at me was Combat Shock. I even heard that there's a cult following for this film. That's awesome. Naturally, I decided to put my head down and learn more about Troma, low-budget films, the film Combat Shock specifically, and how the hell the film was even made. Here's a retrospective on the film Combat Shock and a short dive into Troma. Ah, Tromaville. A small town with over 1,000 residents. Watch out for the toxic waste. That's their drinking water. Some residents are farcical, some sad, some scary, and some bombastic. Low budgets galore and a focus on the surreal. The respective governor and mayor of this beautiful place are Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hertz. The history of Troma Entertainment begins in the 70s, with Kaufman and Hertz, former classmates at Yale, directing extremely low-budget sex comedies while also distributing films of various genres brought to them through various sources. These films were definitely done outside of the Hollywood mainstream. This means that they were creating something new, something exciting that would grab the attention of the 16 to 35-year-old demographic. It worked. They went from providing production support and taking minor acting roles to pay bills, to creating massive hits with The Toxic Avenger and its sequels. They did this by giving moviegoers something different, something fun, unique, and exciting. What really tickles me about all of this is that Troma raised some really big players in the film industry today. J.J. Abrams started at the age of 16 while composing the soundtrack for Night Beast in 1982. Billy Bob Thornton acted in Chopper Chicks and Zombie Town in the year 1989. Kevin Costner starred in Sizzle Beach USA in 1981. And James Gunn, director of Slither and writer of Scooby-Doo 2002, began as a writer at Troma in the 90s. Troma feels like an honest-to-God, real-life underdog story. It celebrates the adages, make your own damn movie, and anyone can make a film. If you have the passion and the attitude, you can make a movie. It may be a piece of shit, but you'll have a leg up over everyone who hasn't made a movie. Even producers who don't have any passion whatsoever make movies.
How do you come up with these unbelievable ideas?
I create visual worlds that are so beyond everyone's normal life experiences. And Hollywood is a place that creates a viewer escape. And what I try to do is, as a director, I try to...
If it wasn't for that can-do attitude applied by Lloyd Kaufman and Michael Hertz, we wouldn't have Troma, and likely wouldn't have the show Lost. You don't see independent film companies like Troma today. A24 might be similar in terms of independent productions, but some A24 films have rather large budgets. They also work with plenty of high-profile filmmakers in addition to first-timers. Low-budget films don't... Okay, I got way too carried away with my rant here. It ended up being something like 4 or 5 pages. Way too much digressing about low-budget films and stuff like that. I decided to turn that rant into its own separate video, so just stay tuned for that later. Troma took an interest in Combat Shock, a film directed by New York native Buddy Giovinazzo. Combat Shock was actually released in 1986, a couple years after they created their most popular IP, The Toxic Avenger. Although Combat Shock may not be the grand, popular film that is The Toxic Avenger, it actually has a cult following, which isn't uncommon for films in the Troma library. My fiance's brother had a roommate in college who owned a bootleg DVD copy of Combat Shock. For some reason, this film resonates with people and has developed a cult following. Let's dive into the film in detail and check it out. Why this film? Out of the hundreds of Troma films, why this one? It is surprisingly considered one of the most enduring cult films of all time. Well, this title could be placed on almost any cult film, but this one does have a delightful low-budget charm to it. The violent and surreal subject matter combine rather well with the low-budget nature of the film. Giovinazzo knew how to stretch his filmmaking dollar with persistence and creativity. With the help of distribution by Lloyd Kaufman, this film truly became a low-budget classic. In an era where New York looked war-torn and transgressive art was becoming more and more present, Combat Shock is a product of its time. With subconscious influences like William Friedkin, who made French Connection, The Exorcist, and Sorcerer, Giovinazzo was able to create a powerful film reminiscent of these. He states his own influences are along the lines of John Waters and Fassbinder, which I can definitely agree with, especially in terms of how dirty and transgressive Combat Shock is. I mean, literally dirty. Look at that. Although it may not seem like it on a surface level, Combat Shock was created with humor and is actually pretty satirical. But when it's real, it's real. The film ended up costing $40,000 out of Giovinazzo's own pocket. The film just kept growing and growing according to Giovinazzo, but the film would likely have cost less money if it was made today due to the ease of editing and stuff like that. It honestly has a decently impressive production despite having such a small budget. Well, some of it looks like a set and some of it looks like an actual location, particularly the apartment. It seems like most of the budget went towards recreating Vietnam in addition to the special effects. Honestly, the sections involving Vietnam are my favorite parts of the film. The lighting, special effects, and editing done for these scenes are all damn near perfect. The explosions and gunshots feel real because they actually were. Everything is so obviously done practically. The lighting / projections on Frankie's face, the main character, are so cool. I love the effect it has on me as a viewer. It feels like he's honest to God dissociating from reality as he reflects on his time in Vietnam. The jarring editing adds a level of chaos to the film as well. It all combines perfectly to create some really effective war scenes and a disturbing tone. If these actors are actually of Vietnamese descent, I have no idea. Back to the humor anyway. I honestly don't know if I'm finding some of it funny because it's intentional or because I'm a freak. The deformed baby gives me Eraserhead vibes, which I'm not gonna lie struck me as kind of funny. Like, I know it's messed up in concept, but it just hit me right in the funny bone. Disturbing for sure, especially with some of the editing and the harsh, distorted sound effects, but the child itself is kinda goofy. $140 went into making the child, and it appeared as though the hot lights melted it as the film progressed. Me and my friends if we found E.T. in the woods. The humor feels maybe misplaced. I don't know. I can't tell if it's iffy writing or intentional humor. The actors are trying their best, and they don't necessarily do a bad job. It's a low-budget movie. What else could you ask for? It's still a good time even though it feels messy. Some of the scenes also just go on for a little bit too long, padding the runtime. If the content were more visceral, I would be probably okay with the extended shots. Like during the beating scene at the beginning, it just goes on for too long. It would have been nice seeing blood or something, but I know. Just a matter of personal preference. It does feel like there's a decent payoff when we do see some gnarly stuff or violence, especially because some of it looks pretty good. I see a bunch of similarities between Combat Shock and the 1990 film Jacob's Ladder. They're both character studies revolving around Vietnam vets with artful sensibilities, and are, of course, partially war films. Jacob's Ladder is more along the lines of body horror at times, like a waking nightmare coming to life. One isn't necessarily better than the other. These two films just have a large disparity between their budgets, despite covering similar subject matter. let's talk a bit more about Combat Shock's subject matter and themes. I think this is where the film really shines. The themes of homelessness and hopelessness are contemporary no matter what decade you're exploring. From substance use disorder to PTSD, there are a lot of characters in the film at the end of their rope. In combination with the shitty and dirty New York backdrop, they honestly feel like real people struggling. It's just so hard to take them seriously when they're wearing stuff like that. The hopelessness and loss of faith are big parts of the film. Frankie's father has a huge American flag behind him as he explains that he lost his business and all of his savings. Not really subtle, not exactly in your face either. I kind of like that actually. Giovinazzo said that the modern understanding of PTSD was still in its infancy as the film was being made. It wasn't until he was editing the film where he discovered more information about the disorder. Despite the lack of modern knowledge, it can be hard to find actors who can accurately convey such an affliction, regardless of budget. Oh my god, this song again? I swear, this song plays like 10 times throughout the film's runtime. Frankie walks the walk, more like movie kicks my brain. Jokes aside, I enjoy the score quite a bit. Repetitive, sure, but it also encapsulates both the decade and the tone very well. Heavy synth and percussion as well as some droning strings. The score has a disjointed feel to it, which fits into the film very well as we watch lives fall apart. This image. Whenever I look up the movie, this image pops up. Where does this happen in the movie, you might ask? Is it perhaps a spoiler? Sort of. At this exact moment, instead of using the gun to shoot himself, Frankie has a PTSD flashback before he pulls the trigger and ends up killing his wife and child instead. When the police show up due to the many gunshots heard, Frankie then does shoot himself. I know I poked a lot of fun at this film, particularly because of how low budget it is, but in reality it's not that bad. I appreciate some qualities of the film, including how bizarre it is and the violence. It's just so slow and repetitive at times that I really don't think I'd watch it again. I would likely watch the ending again because of how interesting it is. Come to think of it, the ending actually makes up for some of the film's shortcomings. Maybe I'll actually watch some other Troma properties. Anyways, thanks for watching, and see ya.